the largest generational wealth transfer that has ever happened in history is underway. Between 80 and 90 trillion dollars will change hands in the next 10 to 20 years. Stay tuned, team. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Okay, team. Today, I'm going to talk about something a little bit differently. This is meant to be the September wrap-up, but I'm filming this a little bit earlier in the month because I'm away at the end of September, so I won't get a chance to do so. But I wanted to go through a topic that is the great wealth transfer and what it means for real estate. I don't know if a lot of you know this. Is that something that a lot of people have been talking about on the peripherals of things? Between 84 and 90 trillion dollars will be passed from baby boomers to Gen X, millennials and Gen Zs over the next 20 to 25 years. And I think that, it's one of the largest wealth transfers in history. And I don't think it's being talked about enough within our industry. I think that it's a pretty significant chunk of it. Now, don't get me wrong, is that wealth transfer doesn't just mean real estate. Obviously, it means, all of the other sectors as well. However, real estate is actually a significant portion of it. Apparently it's over 50%. Now, again, that's based on 2 or 3 different episodes that I've seen. Scott Galloway, someone I listen to quite a lot, and he speaks about it. But that means let's just use round numbers, okay? Let's say 40 to 45 trillion dollars of real estate will change hands in the next 20 to 25 years. Now, that is actually a little bit more of a robust source, is the article that I'm reading at the moment. But there's a few that say it's the next 10 to 15. Now, the reason I bring that up is that, the wealth is coming from predominantly the boomers who hold 70% of all real estate within North America. I think that's a really important part about it, more specifically the US. I shouldn't say North America, I do so by just default. Now, it also mentions that, what are the types of people that will be taking these over? Now, the thing that is a scary facet of all of this is that obviously I asked, ChatGPT, after I gave it a few different sources and articles that I wanted to go through, what are the positives, what are the negatives? One of the first ones that it came up with is that, when a millennial or Gen X or Gen Z get their parents' holdings, one of the typical things is they don't typically want what their parents had. They usually will sell it. Now, over 75% of the time, people will sell what their parents had. And part of that reason is that, 1, trying to stake their own claim. 2, is that typically on a real estate perspective, if you're talking about a primary residence or a second home or things along those lines, what the boomers wanted with big homes and maybe a different design, the Gen X, Gen Z, millennials don't want that. They want something that's a little smaller in different areas, so on and so forth. So they are saying that the impact on the real estate marketplace is that when people are downsizing or selling off their parents' assets, it could mean that millions of homes hit the marketplace over the next number of years. Now, we know that at the moment, if we're looking at this from a relative perspective in the month of September in 2025, is that inventory levels in most of our marketplaces above pre-COVID levels. So if you add that into the equation, which I've been saying for quite some time now, as I don't believe an interest rate drop is going to help inventory levels. I think it's going to mean that inventory levels go up even further based on the number of people that are moving their homes off the market. But if you add this as a trickle effect that is going to be coming down the pike, is that I think that the reality is that this means that higher inventory levels could be something for the next number of years. It could mean for the next decade, next 15 years, whatever it is. So just taking all of that into consideration doesn't mean prices are going to go down, or maybe it is. Because the other thing that I'm a little frustrated with at the moment in listening to all of these podcasts and listening to, people declaring real estate as an emergency because the younger generation can't afford it. I think we just need to be clear on that, is the younger generation can't afford it in the marketplaces they want to live. I think that my opinion of that also is that it's really difficult when I sit there listening to a podcast and someone bitch about that their kids can't buy real estate. But yet, if you were to sell that person's home and you said, well, why don't you take less so the younger generation can afford it? They said, oh, I'll let somebody else do it. They pass the buck on to someone else. And that's probably a little bit more of an assertive point of view that might not meet everybody's point of view than I'd like to make. But getting back to the real point here is that, this generational wealth switch where there's $40+ trillion worth of real estate that will change hands in the next, call it 10, 15, 20 years. I think that's probably more of an accurate assessment, 10 to 20 years. But like the one thing that I think that we need to be conscious of is when it comes down to the negatives, I can see the inventory levels being a problem. But it also presents a positivity side of it because there's going to be a great deal of properties that hit the marketplace or the great deal of remodeling that happens or renovations and everything along those lines that come with it. There could be a great deal of influx into those parts of the industry where the millennials, Gen X and Gen Zs are going to upgrade the properties before selling them, or they need to upgrade them to be more competitive in order to get the properties to sell. So I think that this is all something that we take into consideration when we look at the inventory levels across everything. But it also could mean as well that there's a great deal of a real estate boom that could be coming down the pike as well. And what I mean by that is trending towards more of institutional purchases, sort of soaking up this portion of the marketplace from an investment perspective. And when I say real estate boom, I meant from a institutional perspective, which is also a little bit dangerous. And why are we talking about this? I just think it's a really interesting point because as far as it goes, when you look at the millennials, Gen X and Gen Z, not a great deal of them have much interest in dealing in the multifamily space. Then you take into consideration that 70+% of people want to sell what their parents had and they don't want their assets because they don't see them as a viable investment or whatever it may be. From a real estate perspective, that just brings in a great deal of institutional opportunity. And that's a little sad if you ask me, because we were always worried about the institutional investors actually coming in and soaking up a portion of the marketplace that then doesn't leave a great deal of opportunity for those others. But it could be also another significant opportunity to soak up some of that as we come up, whether it be multifamily, whether it be long-term or short-term rentals, whether it be all of those different things. Now, the other thing that people are looking at, that they are saying is a possible opportunity, is that whilst they want to sell their parents' assets, multifamily, or they want to sell their rental properties, or they want to sell the primary home that mum and dad lived in, is that they're also thinking that they'll take that money and invest it back into the real estate market with their own choices. So that is another part of it that they're saying is a possibility, is that they're not going to pick it up and simply put it into equities. They're actually going to put it back into the real estate market in their own choices. So we could see a really good cycle through of real estate as well. I think that there's a part of this that we just need to be conscious about as realtors, is that we need to be prepared to be advising on the inheritance related sales. I think that that's another portion of all of this. We need to keep our finger on the pulse, that we can speak about that. I think that's important. Working with estate planners and financial advisors to understand where are the wealth transfers happening as well. Like maybe that's what we need to do, is that's the relationships that we need to be nurturing as realtors as we move forward into things. Market to the new generation of affluent buyers that are out there, because they are saying that a primary thing that the millennials, Gen Xers and Gen Zers will do is probably take all of that money and probably upgrade their primary residence as well. So there's just a couple of things that we need to be understanding as we go through this and be able to speak about it intelligently, is that, it doesn't mean that there is going to be a more influx and a supply of inventory over the next 10 to 20 years that we've seen in the past 10 to 20 years. The answer that I would say is probably yes. I don't know whether or not it has a significant impact on prices up or down. I think it has it probably brings in more inventory to the marketplace. So therefore, there would be less price pressure. But all that to be said, it is very circumstantial at this point. It's just predictive. But I do think it's something that we need to keep our eye on the peripheral of things, and just mention in the market trends to sellers, marketing trends in the sense of where are we going next. It's probably appealing to maybe that Gen X, millennial, or Gen Z group in some of the marketing that we do, in looking at unloading a portfolio, looking at making your own moves. I think that that's part of this. I do think that it's a really interesting fact to sort of partner with financial planners and advisors as well, because they will be able to look at that from an inheritance perspective, or who is set to inherit a lot of real estate portfolios, and maybe those aligned partnerships could really help. Estate planners, all of that stuff as well. Just an interesting thought that I had. Could be something that, gives you the edge in a presentation to show somebody that you're more forward thinking. Could use it perfectly. Could be talking to your investors about the possible opportunities that are coming up as well, because I do think that once those assets are in the Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z's hands. The other thing that actually I've just had a quick thought on is fiduciaries. That's something that we have gotten in with pretty well with property management and fiduciaries that have to manage, the trusts and everything along those lines that families leave behind with the assets in them because they don't want them to sell them. They could be also a great alignment for you into the future. Just some thoughts. Thanks so much, team. So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.